Hey y'all, hope you're doing good today. So I'm really excited to continue our presentation on the real ghosts in our lives, and I hope that you find value in the presentation today. I hope that it gets the wheels turning, and I hope that it's insightful and entertaining for you. And I hope you're doing really well today. So what we're going to be focusing on, and this is something that you can keep in the back of your mind as we go throughout the presentation, is how there are two sides to a coin. And this is reflected throughout myth and fairy tale folklore in the concept of the trickster archetype, where there's like a dark and light side, or a good and bad, or a good and evil. Two different sides, and and there's so many different things we could relate to this concept, really. The yin and the yang, and all these different things. But just kind of keep that in the back of your mind, because how it's going to be applied today to our topic is we're going to be looking at the characteristics of ghosts, and specifically how people who walk in the darkness or who have bad intentions and operate that way in their lives, they embody those characteristics, the same characteristics of a ghost. We're going to talk about it. It's really interesting. That are kind of on that dark side, right? Not kind of, but they are. And then how we can study that, and again, just zoom out and see the full picture of all the characteristics of a ghost, right, as our inspiration, since we're getting close to Halloween. And we can see the other aspects of a ghost, because as we're going to see today, I'm going to share a lot of material with you. There are some ghosts that don't have bad intentions, right, and different stories. And so we're going to be looking at the other aspects that are not necessarily associated with bad intentions. They're not malignant, and how we might be able to use those to meet that enemy, that person that, not that we want to have enemies, but that person that's trying to come at us in a way that's causes us to put a guard up. You know what I mean? So we're just gonna learn how to protect ourselves in that manner and to meet them head on in that way, right? Not as aggression, but just as like a shield, an energetic barrier to protect ourselves. See, kind of like this, I guess I should say. And so yeah, that's going to be the spirit of the message today, and I just hope that you enjoy it. So last time we talked about bells. We mentioned the concept of ringing a bell, to ring a bell, and how that creates a sound wave, right? So just go with me for a minute. I like to visualize things, right? It kind of helps me. Maybe it does you. But if you imagine or visualize a drop of water, coming from the sky, and it hits a puddle, just one, okay, for simplistic purposes. And so it hits this puddle, and what happens? There's a wave created, right? And you can see it. It's observable, and it's a circular pattern. Okay, so this is a really interesting concept if you take this and apply it to all kind of different stories throughout time and different cultures. How a circle is often used as a form of protection around the person who's being targeted, or around the person who is who's being targeted, who's being sighted in and approached by a predator, right? So a lot of times in these stories, they'll surround themselves with a circle of salt, and that's supposed to keep out evil, and there's just all kind of different tactics, a lot of different ways you're going to find this theme replicated throughout different fairy tales and folklore and myth. So another interesting concept is that of a moat, which is around a castle, and so meant to protect the castle. So what we're going to do is we're going to start out by reading about bells, and then we're going to read some about castles as well. We're going to tie it all together like we always do. So remember, the concept of a bell, the way we started out talking about this so far, was that when you ring it, it creates this kind of invisible yet very real wave as well, right? And it's really interesting. I'm going to share with you, while I'm finding the right page here in my book, I'm going to be sharing out of this book again. Great book. It just reminds me of that Bible verse that talks about we're instructed to make a joyful noise, unto the Lord. And so there's something to be said, even God spoke creation into existence, so we understand that there's power in words. And that's why I have such a great interest in studying words too. But sound in itself is powerful. And so, all right, so I'm going to be sharing, if you have this book, on page 672, under the category, or I don't know if it's a chapter, I guess these are the chapter names, of sound, essentially. Yeah, I don't know. It's under the category of sound, okay? Page 672, all about bells. So it opens with this really interesting excerpt from, I guess this is a book by Adam Zagajewski, The Bells. I just thought I'd share this with you. We'll take refuge in bells, in the swinging bells, in the peal, P-E-A-L, the air, the heart of ringing. We'll take refuge in bells, and will float over the earth in their heavy casings. So I thought that was really interesting. And we could certainly do a deep dive into that, but let's just, for time's sake, I wanted to put that out there and share it with you, and then I want to move on to another section here. So it says, the tonal properties of bells have made them the expression of the harmony of the spheres, the cosmic unity that the Greek philosopher Pythagoras, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, y'all, saw in the fundamental patterns of numbers and ratios. Isn't that interesting? So there's this harmony, right, of the spheres said here. Again, we have the concept of this this circular pattern, right? There's an expression of the harmony there that this Greek philosopher saw in the fundamental patterns of numbers and ratios. In magical folk practices, bells bring rain, ward off storms, and protect animals from malign spirits, and attempt to ensure nature's harmonic balance with human life. In Russian history, the tolling of church bells is credited with turning the human heart away from its most destructive intentions, or bringing the hard-hearted to repentance. Wow. In Russian Orthodox Christianity, bells are animated beings with names, feelings, and bodies. They are not tuned to major or minor musical chords because the bell is considered not a musical instrument, this is in quotes, not a musical instrument, but an icon of the voice of God. And each bell is prized for its deep, rich, and untuned individuality. And this is a quote from a book that he references here. So I just encourage you to get this book. It's really great. Every part of it that I've tapped into and read, it's just incredible. But how interesting is that? The symbolism of bells, the importance of bells. Throughout different belief systems. So I love how it says that they are not tuned to major or minor musical chords because the bell is considered not a musical instrument but an icon of the voice of God, and because it has individuality, right? Untuned individuality. This reminds me of the concept that we talked about before in a previous video where again, just to reference that trickster archetype, people throughout different stories in history have been lured away off the straight and narrow, right? Off the right path that they should have remained on. They have been lured away a lot of times by this archetypal figure who is playing, like a flute type instrument. So it sounds good, and it's kind of like it entices their senses, and they kind of get disoriented and just lose their way. See, it's like that temptation. It's like a personification of the concept of temptation and getting off of the right track. And so when you embody the concept of a bell, I love how it says specifically it represents an icon of the voice of God, right? Which is, if you're a spiritual person, that kind of rings true for you, or probably resonates for you, and I know it does for me, that we are supposed to be through the Christian lens. One example, and again, feel free to apply your own lens, but through the Christian lens, it's that we are the body of Christ, right? And so, and that when we have the Holy Spirit inside of us, it's kind of like we are the vessels, right? So it speaks through us. And so in that way, when you think about being the voice of God, that makes sense. And I love how it says they are not tuned to major or minor musical chords. So it's talking about being independent, about not aligning oneself with these other chords out here, which might be temptations. In other words, the concept here that I'm pulling from this is that it's strong. It's this metal that's impenetrable, and is able, a lot of times bells last a long time throughout history, and so they've been possibly galvanized. I'm not sure what all the process they go through to ensure they're weatherproofed or whatever, but they last, and they just dance to their own tune. They're so focused on the right thing that it's, again, symbolically, they cannot be taken off that path. So I just want to be inspired by the concept, the symbolism of a bell, and I hope that you enjoyed that as well. Now I want to share with you the concept of a castle, because it's kind of like the same concept. If you think of a bell as a vessel, okay, and what that means, and how we can kind of be marinating on that as far as what it means to really construct our armor, which is our goal, to protect ourselves, then let's go ahead and switch over here and start studying castles, okay, as a vessel as well, because they're very symbolic of being strong, and again, an impenetrable fortress, which is what we want. We want that kind of armor that truly works and truly protects us. So yeah, so in the spirit of thinking of moats around castles, kind of keep that in your mind too. So now let's look at what are castles. Okay, what are castles symbolically? So if you have the book, this is going to be on page 612 under the the heading of buildings and monuments. And I'm just going to read an excerpt here. It says, to the imagination, of course, every castle seems enchanted. The castle is where the sovereign power resides. This is important, okay? Our sovereignty, our authority over ourself, right? Which is exactly what a controlling person is after. The castle is where the sovereign power resides, and massively walled, evokes a vessel of wonders concealed by narrow apertures and impregnable stone. And then I'm going to skip down a little bit here. It says, what was imitated? Okay, well, first of all, it expands beyond what I read to start with there, into talking about throughout different cultures, throughout history. It describes the moats and the castles and their characteristics, essentially, okay? And then I'm going down to the bottom of the page here. What was imitated in all this but a mysterious structure within ourselves that won't allow the sovereign value to be assailed? Yes. Okay. Children build sandcastles and fantasy castles where the innermost self can live, especially if the outer circumstances are very unfavorable. Deep, watery moats and intricate bridges regulate comings and goings and secure the castle boundaries. The 16th century Christian mystic Saint Teresa of Avila compared the soul to a crystalline castle, of concentric circles, leading to the principal chamber at the center where God and the soul are united. We were just talking about that yesterday, or in the part 1 of this series, where you have the Spirit of God, the Holy Spirit, and the soul, which is like what makes us unique and who we are, right? Our personality. It's like that marriage, that cosmic marriage, okay? So in the center is the most valuable asset of who we are, in the center of the castle, or the center of our vessel, okay? So again, I find it interesting. Here we have the theme again of circles. The 16th century Christian mystic St. Teresa of Avila compared the soul to a crystalline castle of concentric circles leading to the principal chamber at the center, where God and the soul are united, which is what happens when we go, in the story, in the concept of the hero's journey, when we venture into the underworld and we find God, and then we have some struggles. And we go on this grand adventure, but then there's a marriage, and that's the treasure that we bring back up to the topside world, right? And then it needs to be protected as our greatest pearl, okay? And so it's kind of like reflected in a lot of Disney movies, like in The Lion King, remember who you are, and remembering our true spiritual heritage. I could just go way off on a tangent, but you get the point. So, yeah. She noted that many go no further than the outer walls or courtyard and fail to explore the delights of the interior rooms, or who dwells in the midst of the castle, or who dwells in the midst of the castle. See, a lot of people never go there. And this again is represented through different features, or personified through different parts and pieces and characters within a story, a folklore, or a fairy tale. Where, like in Frozen, the mother warns the daughters, that how magical this river is, but not to go too deep, or you won't make it out. It'll be all consuming. So there's this treasure that's, found if you're willing to go far enough. And so, and if you think about the power of God, right? Especially how we referenced where it said that he's an all-consuming fire, right? So interesting, right? Where it says, or who dwells in the midst of the castle. Fairy tales and the stories of knightly romance, knightly, like knights, right? Knightly romance, often depict the soul as a beautiful princess or queen whose presence is the fountain-like animating spirit of the castle. Yet the shadow aspect of the castle is that the defenses that can insulate can also constrain. Yes. Often the lady is spellbound by the father, or by a father magician, or threatened by a wicked stepmother, or a barren, haunted, dispirited, or asleep, until the night of virtue, night, K-N-I-G-H-T, right? Until the night of virtue can extricate or awaken her. Just like all these different stories that, we saw or heard growing up, right? I'm sure this is ringing a bell for you. It did for me. Grail castles with their revolving walls, vanishing hosts, and hidden entrances evoke the disorienting strangeness of the invisible realms of the psyche, and the struggles and illusions that must be negotiated through nightly awareness if one is to claim one's soul. I'm going to pause here for a minute. So when it's talking about claiming the soul, it's like it's there, but you need that numinous aspect that's found on the interior, the part that it's kind of like it's the life force energy that animates us. But again, there has to be this cosmic marriage. So when it says, you have to have this nightly awareness to claim your soul. So that's where you have to wake up. You have to come into this awareness, and then it's a choice, right? Again, claiming the soul is that cosmic marriage, right? Between the numinous and you. And so interesting. So I want to finish up this section here because it's just really interesting and very applicable, conceptually to constructing our armor. But awareness is not just reason. It says Kafka, K-A-F-K-A, Kafka's last novel, Das Schloss, meaning either castle or lock, describes an enigmatic castle on the edge of town that withstands every siege upon its inner truth, resisting our rationalistic attempts to unravel the soul's mystery. Earlier, and then it references a book here. Earlier, alchemy had depicted the hermetically sealed vessel as a castle that not only defends its contents from invasion, but prevents the premature escape of the volatile stuff that might eventually coagulate into golden substance. I wrote wow here. I thought, yeah, that certainly reflected. We mentioned Rapunzel, the story, and I haven't investigated all the different versions of Rapunzel, but the Disney version, Entangled, it certainly puts this into animation when it shows, and then same thing with Frozen. There's these powers that these maidens have, right? These young princesses, they have, but they're not recognized as being as powerful as they actually are, and so they have to be protected. Those powers have to be protected, right? And it's destructive otherwise if they're not handled appropriately. And they can also be exploited when it's not recognized as great and powerful. Then one doesn't know to protect it, and then it can be seen easily because it's not guarded, it's not hidden by someone looking to exploit. See? And so I love how it says the castle not only defends its contents from invasion, but also prevents the premature escape of the volatile stuff that might eventually coagulate into golden substance. It's kind of like, you might think of this like with the concept of the best part of you, even if you were taken advantage of by a con artist, a person who was a wolf in sheep's clothing. Even if you experience that, you can take solace. I've come to this conclusion. I surely hope that you have as well, or you're on your way there. The conclusion that the best part of us, they didn't get that because we weren't even aware of it, see, while we were with them. In fact, for a lot of us, it was the experience of being, excuse me, exploited or taken advantage of that helped to transform us into the best version of ourselves. So that's kind of how the hand of God, you might think, comes down and works all this out, see. The numinous aspect, which is a lot of times what actually wakes us up even furthermore, to spirituality, the spiritual realm. So, if you have experienced psychological abuse, covert, being the victim of a covert narcissist, a sociopath, psychopath, someone with bad intentions, right? If you have been on the receiving end of a predatory force, okay, a predator, then the concepts reflected in the symbolism that all these stories are so rich in, these concepts of invasion, siege, the need for protection, all that probably really resonated with you and stood out for you, because when we wake up, this is when we start trying to figure out, okay, I recognize that I need some protection. You know what I mean? I can't just Like that friend of mine, I've told y'all, she told me, she's like, you're too open. We realize we can't just be totally, just open energetically to anybody and everybody. We understand this need for armor, for protection. So we start trying to figure out at this point, once we've, gotten to a place of safety, and we can think straight, and the fog kind of lifts, the brain fog lifts, then it's like, all right, what exactly is this armor of God, and how do I get it, or how do I construct it? All right, which I want to dive into the concept of armor. I think it's really interesting. But logic tells us that in order for us to know how to protect ourselves from danger, we need to know what the danger is, which reminds me of the Bible verse that talks about being wise as serpents, right? Innocent as doves and wise as serpents. So if you think about, all right, studying serpents so we can understand their wisdom, what does that mean? Then consider the analogy of, a snake in the grass. When you are walking and there's a snake in the grass, they're very well camouflaged, especially if you're close up. You're kind of like you can't see the forest for the trees concept, they're right there. And just to further highlight this, think about, like if you've ever tried to point something out that's like right in front of you to a toddler, you're like, hey, look at that. And it's like, 6 or 7 feet out in front of you. If it's a new concept to them, and it could just be something as simple as, I don't know, a hot air balloon. Maybe it's, maybe not 5 or 6 feet out in front of you. Maybe it's, 40 feet out in front of you, but it's huge, because of the size. You're like, hey, look at that, look. And, they may be like, they don't know, where you're pointing, what you're pointing at, because they don't know what they're supposed to be looking for. But because you have the experience of understanding how to identify things, right? Because you're familiar with them, then you can see it. It's probably a bad analogy with a hot air balloon. I don't think a toddler would miss that, but hopefully you get the concept here. Well, planes are a really great example. It's really, if you just point and tell, a friend of yours that's grown, hey, look at that plane, they're going to look until they see it. And they're going to know when their eyes land on it, oh, that's a plane. But if you tell a kid who's unfamiliar, like a little kid, hey, look at that plane, if they're not super familiar with it, then, even though if they see it, it may not register with them because it's unfamiliar. See what I'm saying? So, with the concept of understanding the wisdom of serpents, right? Knowing your enemy, understanding, studying your enemy so that you can have that wisdom and therefore know how to protect yourself. The concept of the snake in the grass is kind of like that. It's unfamiliar to you, and it's the only way that conceptually you can really grasp what all it entails. What makes it what it is to, again, have that expanded thinking where it's kind of like you have to come at it from a bird's eye view, okay? And like an expanded or elevated view. And the way that we do that, right, just to bring some logic into this, right, like how do you look at that from an expanded view, right? Sounds good, but what does that mean? Stepping back and asking questions, right? Like from a place of curiosity, just asking a lot of questions serves as your helicopter ride up here, to have that bird's eye view, for the expanded, view, so that you can truly understand. You can see all sides, and you can really understand that predator, so that when it is coming up close to you, you're not going to react like a uninitiated child, and you won't see it, and therefore become a victim. See? So again, it's kind of like, the concept in the Bible, seek and you shall find, knock and the door shall be opened. Same thing. So, understanding the enemy is going to help us to make wise decisions to protect ourselves, okay? So I have this t-shirt I mentioned to y'all before. I'll show you one day. But it says, emotions distort reality, right? How true is that? So the first thing, before we try to attempt to construct this armor to protect ourselves further from predators, be it old predators coming back or new predators, whatever, it doesn't matter, all predators, in order to construct it, the first thing we need to be able to do is to take care of those emotions, deal with them. You know what I'm saying? Don't run from them, but, you know, sit with them, process, feel them. And so that really should be our first step in our healing. Dealing with our disappointment, dealing with our anger, our fury, our rage, however intense it is, deal with it appropriately. But that's required before we can see straight, right? You can't even see. Emotions are clouding your sight. So you can't, it's like perpetuating that brain fog, but in a different way, right? These manipulators created the brain fog, and then once we started waking up and removed ourselves from that, you know, horrible toxic atmosphere, environment, then it's like the fog starts to lift, but there's another stage to it, just like in these stories where all these the hero goes on the journey and there's multiple trials and tribulations they have to go through. I mean, it's kind of like, oh, they're coming out of this one, great, and you know, you're reading the story or whatever and you're excited about it, you're watching the movie or whatever it is, and then there's another one, there's another, you know, challenge, trial to go through. It's awful. So in real life, it's that way, though, see. And so once you get out of that brain fog from this person, psychologically, literally manipulating your mind, you remove yourself from that atmosphere, then you have another layer to deal with, and that's your emotions. So those have to be taken care of first, so you can see straight, think straight. All right. So once your mind is clear, once you can see clearly, once you feel balanced and stable, now you're ready to research, all right, and do some deep dives. So let me go ahead and share with you the section about ghosts in this book, and super interesting. And this is, if you have it, it's going to be on page 788. And I just want to share with you a little bit extra here that was interesting to me. There's an artwork referenced. It's called The Ghost of Oiwa, or Oiwa, O-I-W-A, by Shunkose Hokushu. It's a woodblock print from 1826 in Japan. Really interesting because it shows the ghost and then a ball of fire behind her, right? It says also called Willow the Wisp, and many other names, an eerie light that often appears in marshes or cemeteries associated with the soul of the dead. So when we're talking about concepts like this, okay, and the two sides of the coin, thinking of ghosts and you know, the dead, think also about spiritually being dead, right? Like someone who's like a zombie in real life, you know what I'm saying, spiritually. So just kind of keep those in the back of your mind as we're reading throughout this. But okay, so but yeah, you should totally look at this artwork. It's incredible. The dejected ghost of a woman named Oiwa looks up with one eye. The other is swollen shut, and she has also lost part of her hair. I want to pause here. When I read the story of this ghost, it was surprisingly familiar. And we're going to start getting into these aspects of malignant spirits who have bad intentions. Many of us were affected physically from being entangled with someone with bad intentions. So when I read about this, it was like, wow, yeah. A lot of us experience inflammation, literally having swollen features on our face. You know, just yeah, she has one droopy eye. That resonates for me. She's lost part of her hair. A lot of us lose hair just from the sheer stress, or there could be other reasons for it, and that's something I just want to mention here. You know, depending on where you are, if you are watching this and you are still entangled with someone who is toxic, that you're just now coming into the awareness that something's off. And look, if there's any possibility that you're in danger, I just encourage you to take it seriously, because there are a lot of people who value a lot of other things over human life, money and all kind of things. So just please, you never know if somebody's not well. You never know like how far off, you know what I'm saying? And so you don't want to like risk that and gamble. I just encourage you to always get to a place of safety as soon as possible. So I just want to put that out there. But yeah, bless her heart, she went through it. Okay, it says her story was the subject of one of Japan's most popular 19th century kabuki plays. Owawa's husband wanted to be rid of her so that he could marry the granddaughter of a well-to-do neighbor. He tried to kill Owawa by means of poison, but it served only to disfigure her. Aware of her husband's betrayal, Owawa died of anger and returned to haunt him as a terrifying ghost. So, again, we're starting to understand these two sides of a coin, right? First of all, that's certainly embodying or personifying the concept of karma right there. But it says, everywhere in the world there is the concept of ghosts, spirits of the dead that return to haunt the living. Typically, ghosts make themselves known as shrouded or wraith-like apparitions, disembodied heads or hands, or through our sensory experiences of sudden chills, the autonomous disturbance of furniture and objects, and in strange knockings or tappings. So, looking at these qualities described here of ghosts, I thought, wow, this is super, super interesting. First of all, it describes them as being shrouded. Okay, yes, that's a perfect description of a wolf in sheep's clothing, right? Seeming one way on the outside, wearing a mask, being, somebody with bad intentions on the inside, right? Hiding one's true intentions, someone who is seeking to devour, which is how the spirit of the devil is described in the Bible, okay? So, yes, and that way, narcissistic type people, sociopaths, psychopaths, they are like a ghost in that way. They are shrouded or veiled or hidden. Their true intentions are hidden. Disembodied. It talks about ghosts being disembodied. I relate this characteristic to people with bad intentions who are hiding their bad intentions, as we only see part of them. The part of them they want us to see. It's like half truths, half just hints. And sometimes we see just that if they have any good qualities at all, well, we're definitely going to see them because they want us to see them. But also this may manifest as like red flags, right? So you're only seeing parts, not the whole. So disembodied means parts and pieces of the whole, right? And then disturbance. This is well known throughout all different stories about ghosts, is how they disturb stuff. I mean, it's typically objects, but we are certainly disturbed. That's what that spirit seeks to do, is to steal your peace. They're thieves, essentially, and they're looking to steal, kill, and destroy, right? Whether it's your spirit, your peace, or your actual stuff that you value, one-of-a-kind gifts or handmade things that you've been given from people that care for you, whatever it is. Sometimes they literally do disturb or destroy your things. And then, of course, I thought this was interesting. It describes ghosts as a characteristic being strange knockings or tappings. We could really expand on that, but I would describe that as just how they screw with us, just kind of like gaslighting you, okay? In other words, if someone's knocking, okay, and you hear that sound, again, here we have this sound that gets our attention and gets us off track, right? Like even logically off. If we're kind of having this thought process and we're putting puzzle pieces together or connecting dots or whatever, they like to distract us. Okay, look over here, look over there, listen here, listen there. So again, you have this concept of this interruption. See? Yeah. So if we remember the castle, the concept of the castle, you know, we understand that these toxic people, whatever you want to call them, whatever label, you know, fits for your situation, we remember that they are thieves at heart, all right? They're looking to enter our castle, right? So, and then I wrote down that one sentence that we talked about earlier, reading about castles. What was imitated in all this was a mysterious structure within ourselves that won't allow the sovereign value to be assailed. What was imitated? What was imitated? Or you might say, what is symbolized here? Okay, in this mysterious structure within ourselves, okay, the castle, that won't allow the sovereign value to be assailed. Here we have an answer hidden or cloaked or veiled in the question itself. Okay, the answer to our question, which was the inspiration for this this presentation, which is, you know, how do we construct our armor, all right? So if you think about it, you know, when you go to the fair, a lot of times they have a house of mirrors, right? And it's confusing, right? It throws you off track if you're not careful. You just run smack into one. So if we're inspired by that, again, a mysterious structure. Think of a house of mirrors if you're a visual type person like me. Mysterious structure within ourselves that won't allow the sovereign value to be assailed. In other words, how can you not defeat but resist the enemy? Remember, in the Bible, we're instructed to resist the devil and he will flee. Because if you try to defeat, you're engaging in warfare and battle, and you're getting stuck in the mud. So this is just my approach. I don't think it's good to engage with an enemy, because they may see, you know, some blind spots that we don't see, and then it's like, you know, we think that we've gotten a bird's eye view of all sides of this enemy, but we may not have. So you want to be safe and careful, you know. And also, I just don't like to operate from, you know, offense. I just like to do my own thing and focus on the good things in life. And, you know, people, you know, like me that resonate with me, and they're good vibes and spirits, and just focus on, you know, hobbies and things that bring me joy, and my family, stuff like that. You know what I mean? So I don't want to invest my time anyway in being focused on an enemy enough to engage in battle. I just don't want to do that. So as long as I can put up some sufficient defenses or armor, construct some sufficient armor, I'm happy. So this is telling us how to do it, okay? If you consider yourself as a castle, spiritually, energetically, okay, then here's a concept I want to introduce to you. Allowing the enemy to think that they're, you know, getting somewhere, okay? This is not engaging in battle, but there will be resistance, but it's going to be resistance that you create in such a manner we're going to talk about in a minute, okay? But just go with me for a minute. In fourth grade, when I was in school, my teacher shared with me how she lived in Japan for a while, and I don't know if it's still this way or not, but this was way back in the day. She was telling us all how at least back then, nobody locked their doors in Japan. And in fact, they allowed just anybody, the public, to walk into, you know, this front part of their house, this entryway, this foyer. And they would have certain things on display that they were very proud of, you know, with regards to their ancestors and heritage or whatever. And so it was not uncommon for people just to walk in that foyer of your house, right? If you think about that concept, and you're thinking of yourself spiritually, energetically like a castle, right? And you don't want to come off like you've got your sword drawn and you're ready for battle, but you truly do want to be operating with armor. Consider this foyer within your energetic spiritual self that you allow the enemy to just kind of, you know, venture into. Just a short, small way, okay? But what do they find there? it's just mirrors everywhere. It's like that house of mirrors. So they are confused. They don't know which way to go. So I want us to be inspired by that. And if you think about it, like the moon, this softer light, this reflection. And then I'm thinking about wolves in sheep's clothing, and wolves that howl at the moon. And in other words, the light gets their attention, right? That's what draws people operating in the darkness to us anyway. It's this light that we have inside. Okay? We can't help it. It just draws, others who also have the light to us, but also those who are hungry and forever hungry and will never do the work that they need to do to find their own light inside of them, see? So they try to steal it from you, but it's the light that attracts. And so you're just going to be conceptually thinking of this house of mirrors that they enter into in your foyer, okay? And we're going to have our pearls secured in the innermost chambers, right in here. So when they walk in, they're going to be surprised. The point here is that it's confusing, it's surprising, it's not what they expected. They expected you to probably put up a fight. They like that. A lot of times it's awful. It's reflected in what they call the duper's delight, the smile, the grin that's evil, that's, in some horror movies, I'm thinking of The Exorcist, which I definitely don't recommend. I saw that when I was young, and those images just burned into my mind and haunted me for a long time. So it was very scary to me. But she that possessed girl in that movie, she just grinned and laughed throughout the whole movie at her own evil deeds. And this is unfortunately kind of true, or definitely true, of and expressed in the term duper's delight. These people get a kick out of screwing with you. They enjoy the evil that they do, which tells you they know what they're doing, see? But they're going to expect you to put up, a fight. And when you don't, it's going to be a surprise, okay? And instead, they're going to find this house of mirrors, which is going to be confusing and surprising, okay? Essentially, you're going to throw them off the trail, off track, okay? So how do you do this conceptually? How do you create this house of mirrors? How do you throw them off their trail? Well, one option is you can literally mirror their actions, which might work, like literally if they, give you an underhanded insult covered up with a compliment, but it really is an insult. You could just, kind of take that, not really react, but just turn around and do the same to them a couple minutes later. You could do that, and maybe that would work. But I kind of view that as playing the game. And so here's another option. You can be a ghost. You can be that lighter side of the coin, okay? And some qualities that also are characteristics of ghosts. So hear me out. You can take on supernatural powers and be invisible conceptually, by essentially separating yourself totally once you've identified somebody who's toxic with bad intentions, right? You're just nowhere to be found. Even if you live in the same town, there's ways to do this. Think about, cutting off access to, this person even being able to know what's going on in your life, see? So just think about, this supernatural invisible power. I thought that was kind of cool. And then like a ghost. Another thing is to become a shell of yourself, right? There's only this thin outer, covering. That's all that they see and know of you anymore. What that essentially means is it's called gray rocking, right? There's no substance, there's no depth to your conversations. And this is only like if you can't take yourself away from a toxic person. So, like if you have to engage with them in conversation, like at work or whatever. So what happens is when you're just like a shell, right, of yourself in their presence, all they're left with when they're coming at you with this condescension and patronizing conversations or underhanded compliments or whatever it is, all they're left with is their own words. Okay? And so it's it's reflected back to them. You think about like a stereotypical ghost, what they look like, or like ghost costumes, and how it's typically just this covering, this white covering or whatever. White is a very reflective color. I think it's the most reflective colors. Like you're a mirror. You're being a mirror. You're a shell of yourself. There's no depth there. They can't tap into anything. They pull the sheet off and there's nothing there, right? You're only giving them this very basic small talk type stuff. You're not sharing any of your pearls at all. Anything you're doing in your life, anything going on, your feelings, your deep thoughts, you're not sharing any of that with them anymore. Okay, so all they're left with is just pouring out their own energy, trying to get something out of you, and it's just going to be reflected back, which reminds me of that concept of return to sender, right? So both of these concepts, how you can be a ghost. You can be invisible, and you can just have that shell is all they see if you can't be invisible, right? And both of these preserve your life force energy, right? And serve as your energetic armor, okay? All right, so thinking of armor and metal, metal reflects, again, we have this reflective nature, this return to sender concept here, right? It reflects light off of it, right? So it's just like a boomerang, conceptually. And it doesn't have to be, that's just it. The concept of returning it back doesn't have to be that you come down to their level and you're, throwing back insults. It doesn't have to be, it can work that way. But another tactic is that if there's nothing there and you're a shell of yourself, be it a metallic armor or, this ghost with this thin covering, and you just imagine the costume and it's white, that color is either way, metal or the white, it's going to be reflective. You're going to have a reflective surface, right? The concept of the crystalline castles, right? The crystals, you're going to be reflecting it back, see? So their insults will have nowhere to land, and so it'll just come right back on them, okay? So it's just a tactic, the concept of reflection, or the supernatural power of being invisible. So and if you think about it, when you're reflecting back to them, it's typically light that's reflected back. I want to close with this concept. In the Bible, Satan is described as an angel of light, right? But we typically associate the concept of light with being synonymous with truth and goodness and all that. But remember the concept of wolves in sheep's clothing, right? So there's this true sheep and then a false sheep, okay? That's kind of like the light with regards to Satan. It's a false light, right? So when you're reflecting that light back, you're guarding your true light in the innermost chambers of your castle, and you're reflecting off this false light that's coming at you, see? So yes, so you may have heard the old saying, be like water, which is really interesting. I just want to close with encouraging you to be like armor, be like a ghost. And so I hope this has been entertaining and insightful, and I hope that it got the wheels turning for you. I hope you enjoyed it. I thank you so much for coming along to hear the message, and I hope that you have a beautiful day, and I'll see you again very soon.